After the bad taste in my gamer mouth that I got from playing Roadrunner's Death Valley Rally a few weeks back, I wanted to give another game based on a cartoon a chance. Surely, Taz and Escape from Mars can't be nearly as bad, right? I've played another Taz game, TazMania, and although it wasn't amazing, it wasn't terrible either. In Taz in Escape from Mars, well, do I really have to spell out the story? I mean, it's kind of in the title of the game. Marvin Martian kidnapped Taz just because he wants a rare Earth creature in his space zoo, and now Taz has to escape from the Red Planet. Seriously, it's not hard to figure out the plot, and in normal platformer fashion, it exists solely to give a reason to make a game. Just like in TazMania, Taz has his spin attack, and he goes at super speed when performing it. He also has a jump and a secondary attack, although these need to be found in the stage. These come in the form of things like throwing rocks and spinning fire. Secondary attacks have limited firepower, but are often helpful to take care of enemies at a range instead of trying to spin into them. So since Taz can spin indefinitely, why not just hold down the spin button and breeze through the game? Well, obviously, it's not going to be that easy. There are plenty of jumps that need to be performed, although sometimes you can use the spin dash in order to climb narrow shafts. Also, Taz can climb some walls. If you see a 45-degree incline, Taz might be able to spin up it, and then around the wall, ceiling, and so on. It's a pretty neat way of maneuvering throughout the stages. You can not only spin into enemies, but also into power-ups. Some of these, like bombs, will do damage if you eat them, so it's a good thing to destroy those. But when you run into other weapons, or even worse, health power-ups, yeah, it can be a bit frustrating, especially when you really needed it as you were near death. With the fast pace of the game, this happens a lot more frequently than you might like. Taz is also very bouncy when performing this attack. Add in slippery controls and there can be some irritating platforming segments. With the extra annoying fact that missing some jumps requires you to replay a large portion of a stage, you might have to move at a slower pace than the game feels like it should be played at. This bounciness also means that it's easy to accidentally find yourself in the path of an enemy. You might be moving along at a good clip, hit a wall, and fall down towards an enemy. Or you might be spinning, slow down because you think a jump is approaching, and then smack into an enemy. Or you could be spinning, slow down because you think something is approaching, again, and then accidentally run into a harmful power-up, thereby also doing damage. You do kinda get used to it, but it doesn't get any less irritating. Even with all of this, you know what I found to be the most frustrating part of the game? The bosses. Just like Roadrunner's Death Valley Rally, I couldn't get very far in this game, but at least I could defeat the first boss this time around. Here, I couldn't beat the second. In the first, it took me a few attempts before I knew where I needed to strike the boss, as then it became easy. But the second boss? I knew where to hit it, but then it counterattacked with a beam of light that did some hefty damage. And you might think that you can safely evade it by going above the boss, but if you land on top of it for more than a second, it'll harm you there as well. I had to give up, as I was getting more and more angry. It doesn't feel like it should have been a difficult boss, but it is. Maybe I just suck at games anymore, but I don't care. I tried, I failed miserably, and I quit. The level prior to this didn't help matters any. You have to try to outrun a screen encompassing machine that is trying to shred Taz up. You can't take your time, but thankfully there's an extra life early in the stage, ultimately allowing you to have infinite attempts at the stage. It's almost like the developers knew how aggravating this was going to be. Take your time, and you'll die by the machine. Go too fast, and you might run into a bomb or enemy or maybe even one of the spikes. Get to the end, hope Taz activates it. Unlike here where I touched the end point, yet still died because the game didn't register the stage as being completed. The spikes that come out of the ground aren't too easy to evade either, even if you aren't speeding around. I almost quit here, but I'm glad I kept attempting it, just so I could say that I made it to the second boss. It makes me feel at least a little bit better about myself. You do get 3 continues, but once those run out, it's game over, and you're starting from the beginning. There are no passwords or saves, so it's going to be one of those cases where you'll just have to keep practicing to make it anywhere in the game. The graphics of the game aren't too bad. Taz looks good, as do many of the enemies that you encounter. The stages have some moments of blandness, such as the first with a boring starry background, but once you reach the second world, you'll see a lot more color. The game doesn't start off on the best foot visually, but it does pick up. I kinda wish that I was able to see more of the game to see what the other worlds look like, but since I can't beat the stupid World 2 boss, I can't say anything on that. The sound, on the other hand, I'm not a fan. It uses the GEMS sound engine, which is notorious for being, well, crap for the most part. The only thing I can say I liked was the sound that Taz made when taking damage. It's pretty sadistic, isn't it? The boss music isn't terrible, but none of the music overall that's featured in the game would be something that I'd be interested in listening to long term. I've gotten flack in the past for saying that the Genesis didn't have a lot of games with good sound, and I think it's because most of the games I'm familiar with on the Genesis use gems. Seriously guys, I need suggestions of Genesis games to check out. I grew up with the SNES, and I need better Genesis games to play. Anywho, back to Taz, Escape from Mars. It's far from the worst game I've played, but it's definitely also not the best game I own on the system. The fast pace would be fine if Taz controlled even a little bit better. But as it stands, it's just a mediocre game with some frustrating moments. The game can be had for about $10, so if you're a fan of the character, it won't break the bank. If you want something that has solid gameplay though, you may need to look elsewhere. Final score? 4 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.